There is a stage in the life of an empath so powerful, Jung warned it could dismantle entire relationships in silence. He had spent decades studying the hidden machinery of the psyche, dreams, symbols, the collective unconscious. Yet what disturbed him most was not madness, but transformation. A transformation that begins with sensitivity so extreme it feels like a curse, and ends with a kind of clarity that makes denial impossible. Jung noticed that when empaths reached this stage, they no longer behaved as the world expected. They stopped absorbing everyone's pain. They stopped apologizing for what was never theirs. They stopped begging for recognition. Instead, they developed a stillness so sharp it exposed the fractures in families, the secrets in friendships, the manipulations in love. People around them grew unsettled, jokes died on lips, defenses crumbled without a word being spoken. It was not violence that made them dangerous, it was perception. And that perception, Jung wrote, can become a force that either liberates or destroys. For the empath, this stage is the threshold. For those around them, it is the mirror they cannot bear. To understand how an empath arrives at this stage, we must return to where they begin. The empath's story does not start with strength. It begins with overexposure. From childhood, the empath becomes the unacknowledged caretaker. When parents fight, they feel it in their chest before the words are spoken. When a sibling sulks in silence, they carry the weight of that silence as if it were their own. In classrooms, they sense who is about to be humiliated before it happens, and they wince as though they were the ones targeted. To outsiders, this sensitivity looks like maturity. Teachers describe them as old souls. Parents marvel at how in tune they are. Friends confide secrets in them, believing they have found a safe harbor. But what others call a gift is, for the empath, a constant storm. Imagine walking into a party where everyone else hears music, laughter, small talk. You, however, hear the undercurrent, the jealousy in the corner, the envy behind polite smiles, the grief hiding beneath raised glasses. Imagine trying to enjoy yourself while your body is flooded with signals no one else acknowledges. Does that sound familiar to you? Have you ever walked into a room and felt something shift inside you, long before anyone else noticed? That strange weight you couldn't explain but couldn't ignore? If so, you already know what it means to live inside an empath's skin. This is the everyday reality of the empath, carrying the invisible weather of every room. At first, the empath believes this burden has meaning. They are told they are kind, selfless, a good listener. They convince themselves that absorbing other people's chaos is their purpose. So they adapt. They apologize when conflicts erupt, even if they caused none of it. They lower their voice, suppress their anger, forgive before an apology is offered. They learn to bend themselves into whatever shape keeps others calm. And slowly, something precious dissolves, their own identity. Their voice grows quieter, their boundaries blur, their dreams collect dust in the corners of their lives. They become the background character in everyone else's story, all while secretly collapsing under the weight of unspoken obligations. This is the tragedy of the empath's early stage. They confuse self-erasure with love. Have you ever apologized just to stop the argument, even when you knew you weren't wrong? Have you kept quiet so others could stay comfortable, even as your own chest burned with unspoken words? If those questions sting, it is because they are not hypothetical. They are the lived reality of almost every empath. Worse still, their sacrifice is rarely recognized. The friend who vents to them never asks how they are doing. The family member who relies on them never wonders who carries their burden. The partner who takes their loyalty for granted never questions the cost. And so the empath's generosity becomes an unpayable debt. What began as a gift mutates into an expectation. People stop thanking them because the empath's giving is assumed. Day after day, year after year, the empath feels their strength draining. They wonder, why do manipulators always find me? Why do I always end up holding the pieces of other people's disasters? Why does my love feel more like labor than connection? The exhaustion deepens, and it is precisely this exhaustion that becomes the seed of transformation. Every empath eventually reaches a breaking point, but the nature of that break surprises them. It doesn't always come as betrayal or cruelty. Sometimes it is subtler and more devastating. It's the day they finally admit their exhaustion out loud and no one listens. It's the day they ask for help and the room goes silent. It's the day they collapse after years of holding everyone else together, and the very people they carried simply step over them. In that moment, the empath expects an explosion. They brace for rage, for tears, for hysteria. But the explosion never comes. Instead, something else emerges. Not chaos, not despair, but silence. A silence so foreign, it feels almost inhuman. A silence that does not collapse, but crystallizes. In that silence, the empath sees what they had long refused to admit. They see the manipulations they once excused, the selfishness they once rationalized, the illusions they once clung to. Maybe you've had a glimpse of this too. That one moment when you suddenly stopped reacting, and instead, everything around you became clear. You didn't shout, you didn't defend, you simply saw. And once you saw, you couldn't unsee. This silence frightens people, because for the first time, the empath does not soothe, does not absorb, does not bend. They simply stand still and see. Those who depended on the empath's endless forgiveness suddenly face something terrifying: accountability. No tears to soften them, no apologies to comfort them, no emotional labor to protect them from themselves. And this, Jung recognized, is the threshold. The moment an empath becomes immune to manipulation. The moment they step out of servitude and into clarity. This silence is not the end. It is the beginning of what Jung called the dangerous stage. Because once an empath crosses this line, they display unmistakable signs, signs that unsettle everyone around them, signs that reveal the empath is no longer the caretaker, but the mirror, signs that turn their very presence into a disruption. In the next part, we will uncover the 5 exact signs of this transformation. And if even one of them feels familiar, it means you are closer to the final stage than you realize. When an empath crosses the threshold into silence, the world around them begins to change. Jung called this transformation dangerous, not because the empath becomes destructive, but because they become impossible to control. Their clarity is unsettling. Their presence disrupts illusions. Here are the 5 signs that reveal an empath has entered this final stage. Sign 1. The end of the rescuer. In the early stages, empaths rush to save. They extinguish fires that are not theirs, soothe conflicts that others created, and sacrifice their own peace to maintain the peace of others. But in the final stage, the rescuer dies. The empath sees the cost of endless rescue. It keeps manipulators comfortable. It keeps chaos alive. It prevents others from ever facing themselves. And so they stop. They let the flames burn. They allow others to stumble, to fail, to face consequences. Not out of cruelty, but out of recognition. Growth never comes without responsibility. And this sudden refusal terrifies those who depended on the empath's constant intervention. For the first time, the empath steps back, and the world must hold its own weight. Sign 2. Clarity without illusion. Most people survive through self-deception. They rationalize betrayals. They ignore red flags. They pretend not to see. The final stage empath cannot do this. Their perception sharpens into a kind of inner X-ray. They don't just hear words, they see trajectories. They don't just listen to promises, they feel the inevitable outcome. A partner who insists, "I'll change," is already a memory in their eyes. A colleague's charming story is already exposed as a scheme. They don't guess, they know. And this knowing is unnerving, because illusions that once held relationships together collapse the moment the empath looks at them without flinching. Maybe you've felt a fragment of this clarity yourself, That one moment when someone was smiling at you, speaking kindly, and yet your body knew something was wrong. Weeks later, the truth emerged, and you realized you had seen it all along. For the final stage empath, that moment is no longer rare. It is constant. Sign 3. The calm that frightens. In the past, empaths were known for emotional storms, crying, pleading, endless explanations. But in the final stage, the storm vanishes. When betrayed, they do not scream. When manipulated, they do not beg. They respond with an unsettling calm. It is the calm of someone who no longer doubts what they see. The calm of someone who has no interest in persuading others to admit the truth. The calm of someone who has already decided where to stand. This calm is terrifying to those who expected emotional chaos, because it means the empath cannot be guilted, cannot be baited, cannot be pulled back into old games. Sign 4. Intuition that commands action. Earlier in life, empaths second-guess themselves. They wonder, am I too sensitive? Am I imagining it? But in the final stage, doubt disappears. Their body, their instincts, their dreams become instructions rather than suggestions. If something feels wrong, they leave. If someone feels false, they withdraw. If a path feels destructive, they refuse to walk it. No debate, no bargaining, no need for permission. It is not arrogance, it is alignment. And once they trust their intuition fully, they move through the world like a force that bends events around them. Sign 5. Boundaries like stone. Perhaps the clearest sign of the final stage is this. Once the empath sets a boundary, it does not move. In the past, they forgave endlessly. They gave second chances, third chances, excuses upon excuses. They believed compassion meant endurance. But now, one violation is enough. The door closes. Not with anger, not with revenge, simply with finality. This boundary feels brutal to those who were accustomed to infinite tolerance. But it is not brutality. It is survival. Because the final stage empath knows, every time they reopen a door that should have stayed closed, they sacrifice themselves on the altar of someone else's denial, and they refuse to do it anymore. Have you ever felt that shift in yourself? That moment when you realized you could forgive endlessly, or you could finally walk away and never return? That is the essence of this boundary. For the final stage empath, it is not a single moment, it is a permanent state. Taken together, these 5 signs make the empath into someone society struggles to accept. They will be called cold when they are simply clear. They will be accused of arrogance when they are simply aligned. They will be labeled dangerous when, in truth, they have simply stopped surrendering. Jung saw this stage as perilous because he knew how others would react. Those who depend on illusions fight to the death to preserve them. And when confronted by someone who dismantles illusions in silence, the reaction is often hostility, fear, or exile. This is the paradox of the empath's final stage. The very clarity that sets them free also isolates them. But Jung did not leave it at danger. He believed this stage could become not a curse, but a power, if it was consciously integrated. In the final part, we will explore how this transformation can be carried without destruction. The 3 steps Jung outlined for turning dangerous perception into conscious strength. Step 1. Discernment, knowing what is yours and what is not. The first step is separation. An empath at the final stage must learn to ask, is this mine or is this the collective? Because their body, their mind, their dreams often carry signals from everywhere. Grief that belongs to a stranger, anger that belongs to a community, fear that belongs to a partner. Without discernment, the empath becomes overwhelmed, drowned by storms that are not theirs to carry. With discernment, they regain clarity. History offers striking examples. Princess Diana, for instance, was often described as the people's princess, not because of her crown, but because of her unusual sensitivity. She absorbed the pain of strangers as though it were her own. But what set her apart was her ability to separate what she could carry from what she could not. Walking through hospitals, holding the hands of AIDS patients when others recoiled, she carried their dignity, but not their fear. That discernment transformed her empathy from burden into power. Discernment does not make the empath cold, it makes them clear. Step 2. Shadow integration, facing the mirror within. The second step is perhaps the hardest, because what the empath sees in others, the manipulation, the pride, the avoidance, they must also see in themselves. For years, the empath projected, "They are cruel, I am kind. They are selfish, I am selfless." But Jung warned, no perception is pure. We recognize shadows in others because those same shadows live within us. When the empath finally admits, "Yes, I too carry anger. Yes, I too have been manipulative. Yes, I too escape when I am afraid," something extraordinary happens. The gaze softens, the clarity sharpens, but the judgment dissolves. Integration does not make them weaker, it makes them whole. Consider Robin Williams. The world saw his laughter, his brilliance, his wild improvisations. Few realized that his comedy came from a place of profound sensitivity to suffering. He carried others' shadows and eventually faced his own. His art was not denial, it was integration. He transmuted inner chaos into joy for millions. And though his life ended tragically, his legacy shows how facing one's own darkness can become light for the world. That is shadow integration, not denial, not repression, but alchemy. Step 3. Conscious service, becoming medicine, not martyr. The final step is service, but not the martyrdom the empath once practiced, where they bled themselves dry for others. Conscious service is something different. It means creating containers, holding space without being consumed, guiding without losing yourself. The final stage empath realizes their gift is not meant to be hidden, nor is it meant to drown them. It is meant to be offered in forms that strengthen both giver and receiver. Think of Mr. Rogers. For decades, on his quiet children's show, he carried the burdens that few dared name: divorce, death, racism, war. He didn't avoid them, he looked straight at them and translated them into language children could bear. His presence was not performance, it was conscious service. He did not lose himself in the pain of millions of children. He transformed that pain into lessons of resilience. Or take Chester Bennington, the voice of Linkin Park. He was raw, vulnerable, empathetic to the despair of an entire generation. His songs were not entertainment. They were lifelines for those who could not find words for their own pain. In offering his voice, he showed that empathy, consciously given, becomes medicine for millions. Service does not mean sacrifice, it means strength. When these 3 steps combine, discernment, shadow integration, conscious service, the empath is no longer broken, no longer drowning, no longer dangerous to themselves. They are still dangerous, yes, but dangerous in the way a storm is dangerous to lies, dangerous in the way truth is dangerous to illusion. Jung feared this stage because of what it could dismantle, but he also hoped for it because of what it could create. Imagine a world where empaths no longer apologize for their perception. Imagine a world where sensitivity is not mocked but honored. Imagine a world where the very people once called too much become the leaders who guide us through collapse into renewal. That world begins with you. If you have recognized yourself in even part of this journey, know this: your clarity is not your curse. It is your signal that you are crossing into the final stage. Jung called it dangerous, and he was right. But perhaps it is exactly the danger the world now needs. Write in the comments, "I choose clarity," and listen closely, because the moment you write it, the moment you speak it, even quietly to yourself, you are no longer just repeating words. You are declaring. You are marking the shift where your sensitivity stops being what breaks you and starts being what makes you. That is the turning point, the exact moment when pain becomes power. And then, don't stop here. Watch the other videos, because this is not a single step, it is a journey. Every video on this channel is designed to take you deeper into that transformation, to help you set boundaries without guilt, to trust your intuition without fear, and to carry your empathy as strength instead of weight. If you stop at one moment of clarity, the old patterns will try to drag you back. But if you keep returning, if you keep learning, you build layer upon layer of resilience until nothing and no one can rewrite your story again. So write it, declare it, and then keep watching, because your journey doesn't end here. What once felt unbearable can become the very thing that creates you. See you.